Well, welcome back to TRU Talks with me, Chris Heal. And yes, we are still recording these remotely at the moment, but with the Premiership resumption just around the corner, we're hoping to do a bit more socially distanced work back in the office over the next couple of weeks or so. So do keep your eyes out and peeled for that at the moment. We are looking forward to a 14th of August return for the Premiership. But today I'm delighted to say I am joined on TRU Talks by BUCS' Director of Delivery, Jenny Morris, to have a bit of a chat about the state of play in the university game at the moment and of course sort of the next steps for university sport to return. And I'm talking rugby union. You're probably aware by now that we cover university rugby really extensively. So Jenny, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. And I can imagine the last few months for you have been extremely busy, but also extremely challenging as well. I mean, how's the situation evolved for you guys over the last few months?
Yeah, it's been a mixed bag in complete honesty, in the sense of obviously unprecedented challenge, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of things to try and navigate through. But at the same time, it's also given us a real opportunity to step back and look at how we deliver things, look at our partnerships and relationships around the delivery of our programs, and I guess just reevaluate, what we currently do. Are we doing that right? And given the set of unprecedented challenges, are there opportunities to do things better? Ultimately, our aim is to make sure that sport happens in a safe way and comes back as soon as possible, but we'll only do it when the time is right. So yes, it's been interesting, but we review annually anyway, so in a lot of ways it's not too different, but as I said, just perhaps a different or more heightened set of circumstances. And certainly the lockdown and doing this all remotely is a different way of working, because we're a very kind of interactive team in terms of not just with ourselves but with universities and such. So not being out there as much, having those face-to-face conversations was probably the biggest challenge in the first instance.
Yeah, I'll probably come on to sort of the remote working, Jenny, because I know that's probably been, like you say there, one of the biggest challenges for you guys at BUCS. But in terms of returning to play, I guess that's probably one of the top things on your agenda. I know on the website over the last couple of months or so, it does say that you're hoping for a January 2021 start. Is that still the case, to maybe have sport running from then until April 2021 as well?
Yeah, that is still very much the plan, but kind of the other key message we've put out around our return to play work is that we're kind of open to continuing to discuss that. The original decision and kind of what we've published on the website and such was made based off consultation with universities, both staff and students, very much in those earlier weeks of our return to planning work. So we probably started our consultation piece in May, and obviously the landscape back then compared to now is very different, and we've always been mindful of the fact that there was a need to kind of monitor things as they change and progress, and as different guidelines were published. But I think where we are right now, the decision still holds in terms of the key milestones over the next few weeks. So A-level results being published in a few weeks' time, and then the process of clearing, I think, will determine a lot of decisions within institutions that will then obviously impact perhaps our thinking. But at the moment, our members, universities, are saying January start is the best, because I think from our perspective, we want to still deliver the same quality of competition, and the biggest question mark has been, could we do that in term one? And with the message from universities being, we may well not know what teams we're going to want to enter until, say, October, when we normally do that in April. So, the timeline has been pushed back as a result of those things. So, yeah, at the moment, that's still very much the plan, but we're very open to being as flexible and as fluid as possible. And the circumstances get a million times better over the next couple of weeks, we'll reassess it. But it's a very live situation at the moment.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it, Jenny. That is a live situation, and you do have to be flexible, because I know on the website as well, you do mention that when it does come to all this planning, that term one is taken into consideration as well in terms of maybe adaptations of sport as well. So is that something that could change for you if this situation does continue to develop?
Yes, absolutely. And what we're trying to do at the moment is make sure that those lines of communications with staff related to kind of rugby union programs within institutions are as open as possible. Obviously, with announcements coming out from the RFU, the WRU, the SRU around their plans in terms of return to play and what competitions nationally might start to look like, we're very obviously aware of those, and we, I guess, transpose our decision making against the things that they're doing, and to make sure that we're aligned, because I understand that if you're a director of rugby or a student who plays BUCS in rugby union, if national competition or the community game is back, the obvious question is, well, why is BUCS not back, or why is that not going to be back at the same time? So we need to make sure really that we're working kind of hand in hand with those home nation bodies to make sure that our kind of processes are following the same kind of journeys, if you like, because the expectations of students are really what's important to us. We certainly don't want to be in a situation where every other competition and programme is back apart from ours, and at the same time we don't want to force a restart if it's too early. So it's a real fine balancing act at the moment.
Yeah, and in terms of the communication you've been having as well, Jenny, it seems like obviously everyone's talking about the sports side of things, but the overwhelming thing that I've been reading is that these universities sort of said, well, yes, we want sport to return safely, but also we want to try and get our universities up and running as quickly as possible. So from an academic side, was that the priority to begin with before sport can come back?
Yeah, so we, back in June, as part of our return to play planning, we surveyed the 90,000 students that are registered on BUCS Play. So those 90,000 are actually ones that took part in BUCS Sport this season just gone, 1920. The season was cut short, and we just launched that new platform. So actually 90,000 probably doesn't reflect the full kind of scope of students taking part in sport at the moment, but they're the ones that we're able to interact with at the moment. And we asked them around what they feel or what they fear most around returning to sport and what barriers they kind of perceive. And for them, actually, it was access to facilities or safe facilities and actually their own motivation. So fear around, I guess, getting back onto campus and, am I still going to want to go and take part in sport? Am I still going to have the motivation to do what I was doing before? But from a student perspective, timetabling or academic clashes was mentioned, but it actually came out as a lower or more moderate concern, whereas actually when we've spoken to institutions, the concerns around clashing with academic commitments is much higher, because I think if you think sports halls and facilities are potentially going to be lost to lectures, and also it could be the arrangement of lectures on Wednesday afternoons or even weekends, which hasn't been the case previously. So we're trying to work with both sides, if you like, to understand really what it's going to look like. Because that being said, and this has kind of been a real key theme for us throughout, there could be a silver lining, an opportunity within this. And what we mean is, if a lot of universities are moving more towards a blended learning approach, and a lot of lectures may go online for the academic year, maybe the ability to access them is more flexible because of those online portals and such. It may mean actually the ability to take part in sport, the opportunities increased for students.
Yeah.
Certainly those who are perhaps more athlete student than they are student athletes, so whereas their athletic commitments are quite significant, they might be part of a talent ID program or a performance pathway, and therefore actually the ability to access learning online might improve their kind of sport uni life balance. So it's something we're really keen to monitor, but again, it's one of those uncertain things that I guess until we get into September, October, and students are back on campus attending lectures or not attending, doing it through online outlets, we just really won't know. It'll be interesting to see how many students return to campus if the outlet is actually online learning as well, because if you're a first year going to university, if all of your lectures or your learning is online but you're actually on campus, there might be an increased want from you to engage in university activity. So that for us around working with institutions to make sure, I guess, that the services that they can provide are as good a quality and as frequent as possible, because things like mental health in relation to physical activity is really, really key. And if students want an outlet, alongside their academic commitments, then we want to make sure that we can support the provision of that.
Absolutely, Jenny. And speaking to students, was that absolutely key for you guys at BUCS to sort of make a decision moving forward? Because at the end of the day, they're what makes BUCS sport so special.
Yeah, absolutely. And launching our new competition management platform back in September for this season, one of the main motivators behind that was to increase our ability to engage with students. Our previous competition management platforms hadn't enabled us to do that or really fully understand or segment the students that take part in BUCS sport. And it couldn't have come at a better time given the kind of pandemic, because we've had the opportunity to speak to them during that period. So we've not been, I guess, trying to guess perhaps what students want and what they're going to expect. You know, as part of that survey, 60% of those that responded, the survey was only open for kind of 2 weeks. We had over 6,000 students respond to that survey. And 60% of them said that during lockdown, they've stayed as active or have got more active, actually, you know, walking, running, that kind of stuff. Obviously not sport-specific activity, but only 2% of them said that they feel either uncomfortable or extremely uncomfortable about returning to sport. 98% are either neutral or feel very comfortable about getting back into sport and physical activity. So from our perspective, that gives us real motivation to make sure that there's something there for them to take part in when they come back, because it's really wanted.
Yeah, and again, speaking to people, you're getting sort of the directors of rugby involved and rugby coaches from a rugby perspective. And I said before we stopped press the record button, Jenny, that we did an interview with Danny Milton, a director of rugby at Cardiff Met, and he was very full of praise really for the work that you guys have done in making sure that you give clarity to these universities. And for you, because it was quite an important stage of the season, you've got to first of all think, how on earth do we finish the end of the season, which is so important to these teams, but then secondly, give clarity about what next season brings. So was it important for you to speak to those clubs and speak to those teams as soon as you possibly could?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're always trying to remain objective in terms of our particular perspective as the governing body. So what I mean by that is we are the facilitators of the competition, but we're not the ones that take part in it. So, you know, we, have a lot of experience in terms of organising, administrating, delivering competition, reviewing it, working with partners, working with NGBs. But ultimately, we don't live the experience day to day that the students and the clubs and coaches do. So for us, their perspective is absolutely key. And as I said, around their expectations. And working with people like Danny is just fantastic, because what you get is you get the perspective and understanding from an institutional standpoint, but you also get the opportunity to have conversations that go across home nations, that go across institutions. What we've realised is, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have in the next few months, is that everyone's facing the same challenge in terms of the COVID, the pandemic, the kind of coming back from this lockdown situation, going back to university. But the ability, the resource available for institutions to respond to that is quite different. And actually, universities are at different stages of their planning. In terms of that pressure I talked about earlier around facilities. Some universities own their own facilities, some don't. Some sport is a very high up priority within their strategy. For other institutions, it may not be. So, there's so many different scenarios and such a spectrum of kind of position at the moment that talking to as many institutions and as many people involved in those institutions as possible is really key, I guess, to trying to find what that middle ground is. We're acutely aware that trying to find a solution that's going to suit everyone just isn't possible. And I guess just having the support from people like Danny and the other directors of rugby who can kind of see the full picture and understand that really helps in terms of us trying to find the best solution, because it won't fit everyone. But I think there's having that support that people know that we're trying to find what is best just really goes a long way. It really can't be underplayed.
Yeah, finding that middle ground for everyone, Jenny, I think it's been pretty tough during the last few months. And I know one of the key decisions that you guys have made for 2020, 2021 is no promotion and relegation. And what I found quite telling from the other interview that we did around the same time with Manchester Met's head of rugby, Rob Jones, they're massively ambitious. They want to keep climbing towards BUCS Super Rugby. But he said, yeah, of course, we're disappointed that we might not be able to do it, but what comes first and foremost is getting these students back into university, and the fact that BUCS have given us clarity, we know where we stand. So as you said there, people won't be fully in agreement with what you've done, but it does help with you making decisions that everyone knows they're in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And the decision around no promotion relegation is very much aimed at creating a safety net. So, a lot of programs, rugby union programs within institutions have been developed over a number of years. They're not something that's just happened overnight. There's recruitment programs, there's player development programs, there's teams and clubs like MMU who have progression plans in terms of getting up the structure and aiming towards Super Rugby. So, we're very aware of that. And for us, the promotion relegation was really when we were looking at kind of what would be possible. So the best example, or the best way to put it is, we believe we can still deliver as full a season as possible in that January to April window. So on the whole, we expect to still have 6-team leagues for the majority of the leagues within the tier structures, which would still mean 10 league fixtures, which is what you would get in a normal season from the kind of October to February, March window. But you're doing that within a condensed period of time. Therefore, there aren't the break weeks, there aren't the opportunities to rearrange based on weather and other things like that. So actually, it would make every single fixture even more important or heightened. So, if you were an institution who, for no fault of your own, couldn't play that fixture because of the tightened window and it couldn't be rearranged, that could be the difference between promotion and relegation much more than it has in previous seasons. And therefore, it could mean that teams relegated or miss out on promotion as a result. So actually, it was weighing that up, like that kind of influence. And also, when we were speaking to institutions right at the start of our planning, there were concerns around, because of student recruitment is such a big unknown at the moment, student recruitment impacts heavily on institutional budgets, and therefore there may well be decisions made within institutions if a programme has 5 or 6 teams or even 4 teams to reduce that to 2 or 3 teams for this coming season. Right. And therefore the existing rule within our structure is that if you don't enter in consecutive seasons, you restart at the bottom of our structure. And now for some of the programs, that second, third, fourth teams are quite high up, tier 1, tier 2. So to drop out and expect to come right back at the bottom, we feel could decimate programs like in the long term. So as I said, it's very much around that safety net and giving universities the option to almost not have a year off, but align what's possible from their resources to the current situation with a plan to return to normality in the 21-22 season. So it's not about putting the ceiling in, it's trying to protect the programme as a whole. And a lot of people have understood that, and again, can't underplay how amazing that is to have that support and understanding from the majority of people involved.
Yeah, because I guess it's all about sustaining those programs as well, Jenny, at the moment, because it's so difficult for everyone at the moment. And you touched on it before, that the landscape is different from one university to the next university. And financially, some of these universities may well have been hit hard. So to say to them, this is a safety net, we're going to be sustaining this for this year and to keep your rugby program going.
Yes, exactly. We would rather see programs to stay, because it's not, the response to the pandemic is not just a 1-year thing, it's not just a 1 season kind of approach. And that's why a lot of our language or narrative around 2020-21 has been calling it an extraordinary season, to highlight the fact that it's unprecedented. We've never had anything like this. But for us, the planning is not just focused on, okay, what are we going to do in January, or what are we going to do in term 1? It's about, okay, what's the structure going to look like? Then what's it going to look like the next season after, the season after that? Because it may take a couple of years to get back to the point that we are at now. But the decisions around promotion and relegation from this season, what we've done is, where leagues have completed, we have kind of applied promotion and relegation. Unfortunately, there are a small number of leagues where all the fixtures weren't played, and if those fixtures impacted on promotion and relegation, we were unable to offer that. So some teams have lost out, but I think on the whole, everyone understands that that was outside of everyone's control. It's not as if we just decided to pack up the league early and give everyone an early finish. It wasn't that. So yeah, exceptional circumstances, but the response overall has been exceptional in terms of being supportive and understanding.
And just a couple more from me, Jenny, going and looking ahead maybe to the next few months. Evan right in saying I think you guys are making another announcement in August about a potential calendar for 2020, 2021. Is that sort of the next natural step for you guys before taking anything further?
Yes, absolutely. So we've already opened team entry for our league programme, and window 1 closed just over a week or so ago now. We've opened up window 2. The reason for staging the entries has been around allowing institutions the opportunity to kind of model or update us on their plans around their teams as kind of decisions are made internally. So what we're doing is at the end of each window around league entry is reporting back to members and institutions to saying this is the number of teams are expected to kind of have in the structure, this is what the structure might look like, and so on and so forth. The commitment for the calendar at the end of August is to look at our entire programme. So we know at the moment, as I said, we're still planning for a January start for leagues, but we have a massive event programme, so individual championship events, of which Rugby Sevens sits within. So our commitment is by the end of August to be able to publish to say, right, these are the events we expect to deliver in term 1, and these are the ones will happen in term 2 and term 3, to give both students and institutions as clear a picture as possible of what opportunities are going to be there for them to engage with. With the leagues not starting until January, we're also looking at opportunities to deliver an opt-in competitive offer in term 1. As the situation has changed over the last few weeks, it has become slightly more optimistic for a lot of institutions, and I think a lot of students and clubs, given what's being announced by other NGBs or by sports, are saying, well, sport should be back now. Whereas back in May, it was kind of, people were going, oh, it won't be back before January. Obviously, we're looking at sport restarting. So for us, if there are institutions that want to take part in fixtures and events, it's our role to make sure that there's something there on offer to them. And that's what we've been discussing recently with clubs, with institutions, to go, if we were to offer something in term 1, what would you like it to look like? How can we make it as flexible and engaging as possible? And that's kind of where we are in terms of our planning. But yeah, the key milestone, though, as I said earlier, will probably sit around the announcement of A-level results and clearing, because at the end of August, we expect kind of institutions to have a much clearer idea on what students to expect this academic year.
Yeah, and that must be positive for maybe rugby teams listening to our conversation, Jenny, that they might be able to opt into something in term 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And our commitment around that, and it's probably why I'm a little bit vague on details at the moment, is to be as flexible as possible for what works for institutions. So we've got, actually, Chris, an announcement coming out this Friday around that offer and what it could look like. And that will be accompanied by a kind of expression of interest. So we want to go out to universities and say, if we were to offer an opt-in competition in term 1, would you be interested in this, and in which sports and how many teams? Because that will give us a real opportunity to kind of model what it may look like. So what I mean by that is, we could offer national opt-in competition, or it could be regional, it could be tiered, certainly in contact sports like rugby union, but it's hard for us to model that without knowing exactly who's going to be wanting to take part in activity. So that piece of communication coming out on Friday is going to be really key, but updates following that are going to be more specific, and we're going to base it around what universities want.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny. And just finally, I wouldn't be a rugby journalist if I didn't ask you about BUCS Super Rugby. It's something that's been going for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. We've taken a keen interest on it, on talking rugby union. I mean, how impressed have you been with the standard of the competition? Because it seems to raise the bar every single year.
Oh, it's far and away exceeded all expectations, I guess, from our perspective in terms of where the competition is now from when it was launched back in when the discussions were happening back in 2016. So from our perspective, it's been fantastic, but at times it's been a challenge to keep up with it, if you like. But the kind of the outcomes of Super Rugby from a talent ID perspective, so absolutely, seeing where some of the players have gone on to, is just phenomenal, and it's a brilliant byproduct of the programme. But actually, when you take it back, the original purpose of developing the competition was to just give the best competitive experience possible to those students already within the structure. So to see it kind of come on to where it is now, it's just amazing. And for us, it's a product that we're extremely proud of. But again, its success is very much attributed to working with the clubs and institutions involved in that programme. So we have a league management committee for Super Rugby. All of the teams are represented on that. And we sit down regularly to discuss with them what the competition looks like, what changes should be made, how we can develop it, how we can improve it. And having that has allowed us almost to get a bit of a head start in terms of the reaction to COVID and the pandemic, because certainly from a BSR perspective, we've been able to speak to them around the challenges they're facing and their expectations, and therefore how, I guess, we can protect the programme and ensure that we not just get through this extraordinary season, because that's not our objective. It's how we can deliver the best programme possible despite everything else that we're facing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny. Well, hopefully we'll see BUCS Super Rugby and University will be back sooner rather than later. And Jenny, it's been fantastic to chat to you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us on TRU Talks.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's been great to chat to you.
No problem at all, Jenny. And all the stuff that BUCS are doing, please do go on their website, because they're releasing information quite regularly about the situation for university sports, and all the guidelines of how to get in touch with them and universities will be advised on there too. So many thanks to Jenny again, and that has been another episode of TRU Talks.